They called her the desk lady, an admin clerk, stepping onto the SWAT training grounds and getting laughed at to her face. But then she entered the shooting exam they designed to break her. And in just 12 minutes, Rachel Devlin didn't just pass. She shot straight through the system. And when the smoke cleared, 3 senior officers were gone. This isn't a story about some extraordinary woman. It's a story about the people who thought she was no one. And they were wrong, dangerously wrong. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Alive Stories. Today's story is about a simple woman who was rejected from the SWAT lineup until her sharpshooting broke the course record. Let's get started. This isn't a desk job, sweetheart. You sure you're in the right yard? The voice sliced through the desert heat like a knife. It came from one of the candidates, mid-30s, buzz cut, tactical gloves already on. The kind who'd been lifting weights since high school and hadn't stopped smirking since. Rachel Devlin didn't flinch. She stood at attention on the cracked asphalt of the Arizona Tactical Response Training Ground. Sun boiling overhead, sweat crawling down her spine. The line of recruits, 22 men in peak physical shape, fidgeted, bounced, adjusted gear like fighters ready to charge. She was the only one not moving. The only woman, the only one who didn't seem to care what anyone thought, and that made them nervous. Let me guess, another candidate muttered behind her, clerical exchange program, gonna audit our accuracy. A low chuckle rippled through the row. Rachel blinked once, no reaction, no comeback. But the senior instructor had heard enough. Lieutenant Brayson was built like a linebacker with a temper just as short. Stomped over. With a clipboard in hand and an unlit cigar clenched between his teeth, he looked her up and down. Khaki tactical pants, black boots, a vest with her last name neatly patched, Devlin. Her brown hair was tied back tight, regulation style. No makeup, no ornament, nothing flashy, just quiet efficiency. Brayson turned to his assistant and said loud enough for everyone to hear mark her file. Desk lady, if she makes it past Thursday, I'll eat this damn clipboard. Rachel heard it, everyone did, and they laughed, not cruelly, but dismissively. That was worse. Background chatter picked up. HR must be really desperate. She's what? 40. She looks like she just walked in from the DMV. Probably here to write a diversity report. Someone else muttered under his breath. What's she gonna do? File a complaint mid-firefight? Rachel said nothing, not because she didn't have word, but because she'd learned the loudest room doesn't always win. Brayson's voice barked again. Fall in roll call. Names were shouted one by one. Everyone answered with a crisp, here or sir then Devlin, she answered, calm, neutral, present. Brayson raised one brow, gave a half smirk, then turned without another word. He didn't even tick the box. The morning drills began. Push-ups, sprints, load carries. The recruits grunted, shouted, and cheered one another on. No one cheered for her. At one point, when dragging a weighted dummy across the gravel, a recruit intentionally let go of his rope early. His dummy slid into Rachel's path, almost tripping her. She adjusted, stepped around it, no comment. Guess her spatial awareness is more suited for spreadsheets, someone quipped. Still no response from Rachel. Lunch break, the shade under the tent was sparse. Most of the men clumped together. Rachel stood near the back alone, checking her hydration pack. Brayson walked past and dropped a manila folder on a folding table. Someone peeked, smirked. On the front, printed in sharp black marker, was Devlin, desk lady. Hope she brought extra staples. Someone called out. This time, Rachel looked up, just briefly. Her eyes met Brayson's. He stared back, expecting something. Annoyance, defiance, anything. But what he saw instead unnerved him. Her expression didn't move, didn't twitch. It wasn't weakness, it was calculation. Later that day, during gear check, one of the rookies whispered to another, you think she'll even make it to the live fire course? Nah, bet she taps out before week's end. This kind of work, it breaks them, or exposes them, the other added. They didn't know what Rachel had been through. Didn't know why she was here. Didn't care. They said she was already rejected and was just waiting for the paperwork to catch up. But she had no intention of leaving, because Rachel wasn't here to be liked. She wasn't here for approval. She wasn't even here to prove anyone wrong. She was here because no one else had been allowed to be. And that's the most dangerous kind of person in any room. Not the loudest, not the biggest, but the one who's already survived everything they assume will break you. You don't look like SWAT material. Rachel Devlin had heard that sentence, or variations of it, for most of her adult life, but it never sounded as hollow as when it came from a 19-year-old patrol trainee, standing outside the police department's break room, trying to impress two other rookies with his volume. She didn't answer. She just walked past, a coffee mug in one hand, her department badge clipped neatly to her belt. Logistics Supervisor, APD, not flashy, not a field, but every piece of equipment those rookies used, she issued it. Every bullet, she counted. The only thing she didn't do was talk. Rachel's life outside the job was exactly what it looked like: one-bedroom apartment, folded laundry on Sundays, no Instagram. A book on her nightstand was always half read, a handgun locked in a biometric case under the bed, cleaned every 14 days without fail. People thought she was boring. Even her own captain once said, "You're like a human spreadsheet." She took that as a compliment. What no one saw, what no one even thought to ask, was what came before the paperwork. 15 years ago, she'd walked through the gates of Lackland Air Force Base, fresh out of high school. 4 years later, she was teaching advanced tactical marksmanship to combat units bound for Kandahar. Call sign Rook. Ironically, she was the best shooter in her class before she turned 24. But she never bragged, she never let them see it, until the day a fellow airwoman was killed because someone panicked during a breach and misfired. Rachel never forgot the sound, or the moment she realized she had taught that shooter, trained him, signed off his record. That night, she stared at her own reflection and whispered, "It's not enough to teach them to shoot. You have to teach them when not to." She left the military 2 years later with commendations, scars, and silence. She didn't bring her rank with her, just the discipline. Now, at 36, she sat behind a desk that never made mistakes, managing gear for a department that rarely remembered her name. But she listened to every panicked radio call, every failed tactic, every team that breached without coordination. And she started to see a pattern. They're not failing because they're weak, she told herself one night, sorting inventory reports by headlamp. They're failing because no one trains them for chaos. They train them for theory. A week later, she dropped her SWAT application on her captain's desk. He looked at her like she'd handed him a resignation letter by mistake. "Devlin," he said, rubbing his forehead. "You've been in logistics for what? 7 years now." "8," she replied. "You've never worked patrol. I've managed gear for 300 active officers. But that's not field work. Neither are most of their failures." He stared at her. "You do understand what SWAT is, right? This isn't an admin rotation. You don't get bonus points for showing up organized." Rachel placed a small envelope on top of her application. "Open that after I leave." He did. Inside, a copy of her military instructor certification in advanced sniper coordination. Dated, sealed, and signed. Below that, a letter of recognition from a lieutenant colonel in the 77th Tactical Group. His face turned pale. But by then, Rachel was already in the hallway, walking back to logistics, no strut, no smile, just her usual pace, like nothing had changed. When asked in her SWAT intake interview why she wanted to join, she said, "Because I've spent the last decade watching good people bleed out due to poor decisions made too fast. I don't want to lead the team. I just want to make sure they never aim at the wrong door again." And when one instructor laughed out loud and said, "So you're here to help us shoot?" Smarter Rachel looked him square in the eye and answered, "You don't need to be loud to stop the wrong shot. You just have to be precise enough to never miss it." He didn't laugh again. "Let me get this straight," the instructor sneered, holding up a misaligned scope like it was roadkill. "You didn't notice this during pre-check." Rachel didn't blink. "I noticed it. I logged it. Twice." "Well," he said, dropping the rifle on the bench with a loud clatter, "maybe check harder next time, or is paperwork more your speed?" Someone behind her snorted. Another voice mumbled, "She's just ticking boxes." A third added, "You don't send secretaries into a shootout." That was the tone now. It wasn't direct, it wasn't loud, it was worse, it was institutional, and it was everywhere, from week 2 onward. Rachel was put on a different track than the other candidates. No one said it, no one needed to. She noticed her scheduled live fire hours were cut by 40%. She was the only one who had not rotated off night drills. When her protective vest was swapped for a faulty one, the quartermaster just shrugged. "Supply issue," he muttered. She filed a report. Nothing came back. One day, she showed up for a standard team drill, the same one used for over a decade, and was handed an entirely different exercise sheet, marked Advanced Entry Obstacle, Tier 3. She glanced at it, then at the others. They were all doing Tier 1, new rotation. Sergeant Vallis explained with a smile that never touched his eyes. "We thought we'd see what you're really made of." She said nothing. Again, and she did the drill. Again. 12 seconds slower than average. 8 times the complexity. 0 complaints. That afternoon, the department's internal newsletter published a segment titled "Political Push or Safety Risk, the Debate Around Non-Traditional SWAT Candidates, No Names Mentioned." Of course. But the photo was cropped just enough to include her hairline and boots. At lunch, no one sat next to her. One man, who'd nodded to her the week before, now stared at his tray like it had secrets. Another finished early and left without a word at the next fitness evaluation. Her name was called last. Brayson, the head instructor, clapped his hands and said with mock encouragement, "Let's see what Rachel from accounting's got in the tank today." Someone clapped, boom, cham out, sarcastically. The pull-up bar was slick. Her gloves had been swapped out. She still completed all 10, even as the skin on her palms began to tear. Even as someone whispered behind her, "Stubborn doesn't mean strong." But the hardest blow didn't come from her critics. It came from the ones who'd once smiled. One of the admin officers, someone Rachel had quietly mentored through her first year, passed her in the hallway. Didn't make eye contact. "Rachel, hey," Rachel said gently. The woman paused and offered a polite smile. "Hey, sorry, I'm late for the briefing." She wasn't. Rachel saw the empty hallway beyond her. That kind of silence doesn't echo. It chokes back at her apartment that night. Rachel sat on the floor beside her bed, not because she was tired, but because it was the only place that felt stable. She stared at the corner of her small bookshelf, where, half hidden, a framed photo leaned sideways. She and her former unit crouched in the sun outside a dusty compound in Helmand. Behind them, the woman who never made it back, smiling. Rachel whispered, "I'm still in. And then I didn't come here to be the first. I came here to make sure I'm not the last." But outside those walls, the system kept grinding, and it didn't like the idea of being watched by someone it had trained to see. "All right, boys," Lieutenant Brayson said, slapping the back of a clipboard like it owed him something. "This one's not for the faint of heart." Designed by the same Special Forces team that trained counterinsurgency units in Iraq. That means no mercy, no forgiveness, and no do-overs. A murmur of tension rippled through the line of candidates. "Welcome," he continued with a smirk, "to the real final." Behind him stood a maze of tactical walls, metal pop-up targets, elevation shifts, and stress-simulating distractions, sirens, flash strobes, even speakers blasting simulated gunfire. The SWAT shooting course, but on steroids. And every candidate would be timed, scored, and ranked. He glanced at the last name on the list. "Devlin, you'll go last." "I like to finish strong," he said, grinning toward the others. Someone whispered, "More like finish her." Another muttered, "She won't clear the first 3 targets." Brayson chuckled. $10 says she bails by mid-course." The instructors laughed, not cruelly, confidently, like men who believed the outcome was already written. Rachel stood 5 feet away, still, focused, not even blinking. One by one, the men went through. Some performed well, a few stumbled, most missed at least 1 or 2 targets at long range. A couple tripped on transitions or botched reloads. The top score so far belonged to candidate Miles, a tall ex-Marine who cleared the course with 82% accuracy in a time of 4:03. Hell of a run, Brayson said, clapping him on the back. That's the number to beat. Then he turned to Rachel. Your turn. Desk lady, make sure you keep your paperwork dry. Snickers again. A few polite coughs were trying to cover them. Rachel stepped forward. She didn't say a word. Instead, she reached into her vest and pulled out a worn, scratched insignia badge, military issued. The gold trim faded, edges frayed, the name almost rubbed away. She ran her thumb across the surface, then tucked it back into her chest pocket like a ritual. Brayson noticed, his jaw clenched, but said nothing. The buzzer sounded, Rachel moved. And within 5 seconds, the entire tone of the field changed. First target, double tap, dead center. Second, moving the lateral pop-up, down before it fully stood. Third, 90-degree pivot, clean shot mid-transition, by the fourth marker. Even the candidates behind her had stopped whispering. She didn't run. She flowed. Her feet didn't slap gravel, they landed with precision. Each transition was choreographed like muscle memory honed over years, not weeks. Her weapon was an extension of her breath. Her reloads under 1.5 seconds. Her scan and move pattern textbook, but updated. She's not just doing the course, one instructor murmured. She's rewriting it. At target 8, her weapon jammed. Deliberate. No one said it, but everyone thought it. Rachel didn't flinch. She tapped, racked, cleared, and fired. 4 seconds, not a single beat missed. The final stretch had 3 long-range targets, one hidden, one obscured, one at 150 feet. No one had hit all 3 today. Some didn't even try. Rachel adjusted her stance, squared her shoulders, and exhaled once. Crack, crack, crack. 3 targets, 3 bullseyes. The buzzer rang out again. Silence. The digital clock blinked 3:51. Top time, 100% accuracy. Not a single instructor moved. Brayson's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Finally, Sergeant Vallis broke the silence. Where the hell did she learn that Rachel turned? Calmly ejecting the magazine from her sidearm and engaging the safety. 5th Tactical Air Support. I trained the guys who built this course. Then she looked directly at Brayson. And for the record, my full resume was in the file. You just didn't read it. The clipboard in Brayson's hand lowered slowly, like it suddenly weighed more than it used to. No more jokes, no more bets, no more desk lady. Because what they'd just seen wasn't luck. It wasn't political. It wasn't even about being a woman. It was superiority, executed with surgical silence. The range timer blinked 3:51, accuracy 100%, jammed weapon cleared in record time. Targets hit at 150 feet with a standard issue sidearm. And then, silence, not awkward, not polite, reckoning, 15 seconds. That's how long no one moved. Not the instructors, not the candidates, not even the lieutenant with the cigar that had gone cold between his teeth. Rachel stood still, gun safely lowered, posture steady. Her chest rose and fell with the same rhythm it had before the course even started. A junior instructor near the control booth finally broke the trance. That, was clean. All green hits, all confirmed. Still, no one spoke. Then, a shuffling noise, papers being flipped too fast. Captain Halverson, the regional tactical commander who had been standing off to the side for observation, now hovered over a laptop like it might explain what just happened. Get her file, he said to the assistant beside him. Her real one. Brayson stood nearby, lips tight, red creeping into his face like heat rising from a slow burn. The assistant clicked, scrolled, and tapped, then froze. Sir, she was a certifying instructor for the 77th Tactical Group, oversaw sniper assessments in 2 theaters, which 2 Middle East and Southeast Asia. 4 deployments, Halverson turned slowly. Why the hell wasn't that in her flag profile? The assistant swallowed. It was. Page 7, under the addendum section B, all eyes turned back to Rachel. She was calmly wiping down her weapon with the cloth from her back pocket. Halverson stepped forward, trying to recover his tone. Devlin, why didn't you tell us you ran sniper certifications for the 77th? Rachel didn't look up. She finished folding the cloth, slid the pistol into its holster. Then, finally, he met his eyes. Because you weren't asking. You were assuming. Crack. Not a sound, but a fracture. In posture. In ego. In a system that had spent the last 4 weeks dressing her down without once reviewing who she actually was. One of the more vocal candidates, Miles, the ex-Marine, took a half step forward. Wait, you taught the guys who trained us. Rachel didn't smile. She didn't need to. I trained the guys who designed the test. That's when it happened. The whispering started, not rumors this time, but realizations. The man who called her Secretary Rambo, now quiet. The sergeant who made her carry twice the load during drills, now staring at his boots. And the quietest sound of all, respect without words. Brayson cleared his throat, loudly. It didn't help. Well, sometimes the system needs a stress test, he muttered, avoiding eye contact. Halverson, still stunned, looked over the rest of the team. You all watched what she just did. That wasn't luck. That was expertise. That was something we almost failed to include on this team. He turned back to Rachel. We won't make that mistake again. Rachel gave a single nod, not of gratitude, not of humility, of confirmation, because for the first time in weeks, they weren't grading her. They were seeing her. The video had been recorded by one of the tech instructors, a routine part of qualification protocol, but what wasn't routine was what the camera crew captured. Rachel Devlin, quiet logistics officer, the one they called desk lady, clearing a military-grade tactical shooting course with perfect accuracy, under a tighter time than any candidate before her, including the men who built the damn thing. At first, it stayed in internal channels, training groups, leadership review boards. Some laughed nervously while watching it, expecting a fluke. Others hit replay, again and again, and then someone forwarded it and someone else uploaded it. And by Friday morning, it hit the department-wide message board with the caption, "Guess who rewrote the playbook?" By Saturday. It had over 200,000 views, and not just from within law enforcement. The same local news outlet that once ran the segment titled Political Push or Safety Risk was now singing a different tune. Unknown woman sets new SWAT benchmark. Rachel Devlin, a former military instructor and current police department logistics officer, has done what few believed possible. She didn't just pass the SWAT qualification, she shattered it. They included a freeze frame. Rachel was mid-movement, her eyes locked on target, and her sleeve rolled just enough to see the worn Air Force badge at her wrist. But while the public applauded, inside the department, pressure built fast. 2 anonymous complaints had already been sent to the Department of Internal Affairs, and another to the state's Office of Law Enforcement Standards. Attached were time-stamped photos, locker room notes, assignment records, and 2 damning audio clips. One of Brayson. Let's make this course tough enough to shake out the diversity hire. One of Sergeant Valas. She'll quit by day 3, or we'll break her quiet little clipboard ego. By the end of the week, 3 senior officers were removed from SWAT assignments, 2 were reassigned, 1 was encouraged to retire. And for the first time in its 18-year history, the department announced a formal audit of training equity procedures. Rachel was called into a closed-door meeting. Chief Halverson sat at the head of the table with department brass, public affairs officers, and a city council liaison who kept calling her Miss Devlin like she was a judge in disguise. What you did, the chief began, is unprecedented and overdue. We'd like to offer you the honorary field instructor role, full clearance, and oversight on future SWAT curriculum. Rachel listened, quiet, neutral. Then she said simply, I didn't come here for a title. I came to see if I could finish what others were forced to abandon. A pause, deep, still. Then let someone else inherit the room. My job was to prove it could be entered. She declined the badge. She declined the podium. But what she didn't decline was change. 2 months later, the new SWAT training cycle began, and for the first time, the entrance form didn't require a police background check. Female candidates were assigned standardized gear, no more oversized tactical vests by accident. And most notably, 4 women applied. 2 made it to Live Fire Week. 1 passed. The Arizona heat hadn't changed, but the faces at the range had. This time, it was 3 women in training vests moving through a dry run course, each step deliberate, each motion clean, no smirks, no snide comments, just work. From a shaded corner behind the bleachers, Rachel watched silently, sunglasses resting low on her nose, arms folded. She wasn't there to inspect. She was there to witness. A young recruit paused mid-drill, hand trembling slightly as she fumbled with her magazine reload. The instructor called for a reset, but before the next round, Rachel stepped in quietly. Didn't speak. Just adjust the woman's grip, tighten the angle, move her elbow down, nod once, and step back. The recruit looked at her, wide-eyed. "I don't think I'm built for this," she admitted, breath catching. Rachel's voice was calm, like the first breeze after a long drought. "You're not proving anything to them. You're proving something for someone else who's not here yet." Back in the instructor's office, a sergeant reviewed scores. A younger officer leaned in. "Is it true Devlin never failed a single test?" The sergeant grinned. She didn't care about tests. She cared about making sure nobody else had to earn respect twice. On graduation day, Rachel sat in the back row, in civilian clothes. She didn't take the stage, but when the new female graduate looked out into the audience and spotted her, she gave a subtle nod. Rachel returned it, just once. The world wouldn't remember her by a press release. They'd remember her by the fact that now, someone else could walk through the same door without having to kick it open. Because Rachel Devlin didn't tear the system down. She shot through it, clean, quiet, and too precise to ignore. Thanks for watching. If this story made you pause, even for a second, then let it go further. Drop a comment if you've ever felt overlooked in a place you earned. Share this video with someone who's been quietly powerful their whole life. Hit subscribe because we tell real stories that challenge how we treat each other. One seat at a time. Respect isn't a luxury. It's not reserved for the loudest, the richest, or the best dressed. It's what every human deserves before they say a word. See you in the next video.